Part 1. The Foundation. The scale of WWII, not just armies, but the shadows. Defining espionage, the war fought with secrets, deception, and moral ambiguity. The shocking truth, the most consequential battles were often won or lost on intelligence, not firepower. Previewing the three operations. 1. Operation Mincemeat, the audacious deception that changed the Mediterranean. 2. The Venona Project, the silent war against Soviet infiltration within the Allies. 3. The three spies of the Manhattan Project, the most consequential intelligence leak in history. The world remembers the flash of artillery, the thunder of tank treads, and the desperate cries from the trenches. World War II, a conflict of unprecedented scale, fought across continents, oceans, and skies. But history's grand narrative often overlooks the other war, the one fought in whispers, in code, and in the coldest shadow of morality. This was the war of espionage. The true, shocking operations of World War II were not always about men with guns. They were about men and women with secrets, wielding deception as their primary weapon. These operations were so audacious, so morally compromising, and so deeply classified that their full impact was not understood for decades. They determined the course of invasion, decided who got the atomic bomb first, and exposed a fundamental betrayal at the very heart of the Allied command. Tonight, we pull back the curtain on the most shocking espionage operations of the Second World War. The stakes were not just lives, but the fate of free nations. In the early days of the war, the world's great powers had to rapidly professionalize their shadow forces. Britain founded the Special Operations Executive, SOE, tasked with setting Europe ablaze through sabotage and subversion. America countered with the Office of Strategic Services, OSS, a nascent agency built on academic grit and raw nerve. Across the lines, Germany relied on the Abwehr, its military intelligence, and the Soviet Union's NKVD operated with a brutal, ruthless efficiency, not just against the Axis, but against their own tenuous allies. This was a conflict where every piece of information, a troop movement, a new weapons design, a strategic meeting, was worth more than a battalion. The ultimate goal was not just to defeat the enemy's army, but to outthink the enemy's mind. Our first story takes us to a dark, damp basement in London, 1943. The Allies are planning the invasion of Sicily, Operation Husky, but the enemy expects it. To save thousands of lives and ensure success, British intelligence had to devise a plan so unthinkable, so macabre, that it would shock the world for generations. It was a lie built on a dead man, an invented life, and a briefcase full of meticulously crafted fake secrets. This was Operation Mincemeat, the greatest deception in military history. Our second story moves beyond the battlefield to a struggle within the Allied camp itself, a betrayal so deep it threatened to undermine the entire post-war order. Known only as the Venona Project, it was a decades-long code-breaking effort that silently exposed Soviet agents operating at the highest levels of the US and British governments, even while they were fighting Hitler together. It revealed that the partnership against the Axis was built on a foundation of profound distrust and active infiltration. And finally, the most consequential leak of all, the race to build the atomic bomb, the Manhattan Project. This effort was America's most closely guarded secret, yet the Soviets managed to embed not one, not two, but three high-level sources. The information they passed was not rumor or strategy. It was the fundamental scientific data needed to accelerate the Soviet nuclear program by years. This single act of espionage redefined the future of global power and launched the Cold War. These are not just tales of spies and saboteurs. They are the shocking moral compromises and breathtaking risks taken in the shadows. The operations that won the war before the first shot was even fired. Let us begin with the man who never existed. Part 2. Operation Mincemeat. The setup: a corpse and a briefcase. Context: Allied plans to invade Sicily, Operation Husky, but the enemy expects it. To save thousands of lives and ensure success, British intelligence had to devise a plan so unthinkable, so macabre, that it would shock the world for generations. It was a lie built on a dead man, an invented life, and a briefcase full of meticulously crafted fake secrets. This was Operation Mincemeat, the greatest deception in military history. The execution and wait. The body is dressed, sealed in a canister, and launched off the coast of Spain. The waiting game: will the Spanish, ostensibly neutral but German-leaning, find it? Will the Germans believe it? The moment of truth. German confirmation: the documents have been accepted as genuine. The aftermath and victory. Hitler moves key divisions to Greece and Sardinia, believing the fake intelligence. The successful invasion of Sicily, Husky. The deception saves thousands of lives. The unmasking decades later. The moral question of using a body for deception. Part 3. The Venona Project. Cracking the code of the Ally. Context: the uneasy alliance between the US, UK, and USSR. The birth of Venona, a top-secret US Army code-breaking project that began focusing on Soviet diplomatic and intelligence cables in the 1940s. The Soviet code, one-time pads. The devastating mistake, reusing the pads. The slow, tedious process of breaking the code. It took decades. The silent exposure. What Venona revealed: a vast network of Soviet agents and KVD embedded in the US government, military, and key wartime industries. Key agents exposed, without naming those named in the next section. Agents in the State Department, Treasury, and War Department. The shock: the realization that a trusted ally was actively spying on them during the fight against fascism. The cover-up and Cold War launch. The dilemma: revealing the intelligence means exposing the Venona source, which must be protected at all costs. Venona's secret fuel, the evidence used to prosecute figures like the Rosenbergs, though the full Venona details were kept secret. The project's lasting impact. It laid the foundation for the deep mistrust that defined the Cold War. Part 4. The Three Spies of the Manhattan Project. The race for Armageddon. Context: the Manhattan Project, the single most expensive and secret endeavor of the war. Los Alamos, a city built on a lie. The stakes: if the Axis or the Soviets get the bomb first, the world changes forever. The ultimate target: the secret formula for a sustained nuclear chain reaction. The infiltration. Key players: Klaus Fuss, the brilliant German-born physicist working on the highest-level bomb design. He delivered theoretical and practical data, including the complete plans for the plutonium bomb. The second spy, example Theodore Hall, the young genius, a Harvard prodigy who began passing secrets out of moral conviction. His information corroborated and expanded on Fuss's data. The courier, example Harry Gold, the link, the intermediary who funneled information from the scientists to the Soviet handlers, completing the chain of betrayal.
The shocking outcome. The impact. Fuchs and Hall's data dramatically accelerated the Soviet nuclear program, cutting years off their development time. The Soviet success. Their 1949 test confirms the effectiveness of the espionage. The US monopoly is broken. The final realization. The most shocking espionage operation of WWII was not about winning the current war, but about dictating the terms of the next one. The legacy of the shadows. Recap of the three operations: Mincemeat, Venona, and the Manhattan Spies. Final reflection. Espionage is not a clean, noble pursuit. It is a shadowy realm of profound moral compromise. The ultimate lesson: the intelligence war was the war that never truly ended, merely changing targets. The secrets of WW2 continue to shape our world today. Closing line. The bombs fell, but the whispers never stopped. Part 2. Operation Mincemeat. The corpse that won a battle. The setup. A corpse and a briefcase. In 1943, the tide of the war in North Africa had turned. The Allies were victorious, and the next logical step, the soft underbelly of Europe, as Churchill called it, was the island of Sicily. The problem was, Sicily was the obvious next target. German command, under the supreme eye of Adolf Hitler, was already nervous. A direct, unmasked invasion of Sicily, Operation Husky, would be a bloodbath. It required a diversion so compelling, so absolute, that Hitler would move vital panzer divisions and air support to the wrong side of the Mediterranean. The idea, originally conceived in the 1939 Trout Memo, attributed to Naval Intelligence's Ian Fleming, yes, the future creator of James Bond, was insane. Plant false, high-level documents on a dead body and let the current deliver the corpse and the lie to the enemy. The plan was entrusted to Naval Intelligence Officer Ewan Montague and Flight Lieutenant Charles Cholmondeley, a legal mind and an eccentric RAF officer. Their first task was horrific: acquiring a suitable body. It had to be a man whose death was recent, whose body would appear to have died in a plane crash at sea, and crucially, whose death would go uninvestigated by any surviving relatives. They found him in the London Public Mortuary, a 34-year-old Welsh vagrant named Glyndor Michael, who had died from ingesting rat poison. Montague and Cholmondeley took possession of the corpse, giving him a new, fictitious identity: Captain, Acting Major, William Martin of the Royal Marines. The success of Operation Mincemeat hinged on the details of Major Martin's invented life. A forged document in a sealed briefcase was not enough. The Germans had to believe in the man. If the corpse was merely a courier, the contents might be dismissed as a suspicious trap. If the corpse was a real person with a real life, tragically cut short, the briefcase became genuine. They created a meticulous backstory, a form of historical theater. His wallet contained an expired identification card, a ticket stub for a recent London play, 2 angry letters from his bank about an overdraft, and a receipt for a diamond engagement ring. Most poignantly, they included love letters from his fictitious fiancée, Pam, and her photograph, a picture of MI5 clerk Jean Leslie. These small, human touches, the messy reality of a man in love and in debt, were the true genius of the deception. They convinced the enemy's intelligence officers that they were handling the remains of a man, not a prop. The ultimate prize in the briefcase was a letter from Lieutenant General Sir Archibald Nye to General Sir Harold Alexander. The letter casually referred to Allied plans to invade Greece and Sardinia, Operation Torch and Operation Brimstone, and implied Sicily was merely a feint. A single, almost jovial line cemented the double bluff. We stand a very good chance of making them think we will go for Sicily. It is an obvious objective. This was the genius, admitting the obvious target only to dismiss it as a decoy. The execution and wait. The mission began on April 19, 1943. The body of Major Martin, encased in a steel canister packed with dry ice to maintain preservation, was transported to Scotland and loaded aboard the British submarine HMS Seraph. The submarine's captain, Lieutenant Bill Jewell, was given his orders: proceed to the waters off Huelva, Spain. Huelva was chosen with surgical precision. While officially neutral, Spain was heavily infiltrated by German intelligence agents and officials sympathetic to the Nazi cause. The prevailing currents were also known to carry bodies toward the coast. In the pre-dawn hours of April 30th, the body was removed from the canister and the briefcase firmly chained to its wrist, and the life jacket secured. HMS Seraph surfaced quietly, and Major Martin was gently pushed into the sea. The code signal was transmitted back to London, mincemeat complete. The waiting began. Less than 12 hours later, a local Spanish sardine fisherman discovered the body floating near the shore and reported it to the authorities. The body was taken to the town's naval base. As Montague and Cholmondeley had hoped, Spanish officials, while returning the body to the British vice consul, first allowed German Abwehr intelligence agents, specifically Major Carol Eric Kuhlenthal, to secretly examine and photograph the contents of the sealed briefcase. The German intelligence service, already prone to believing what confirmed their existing fears about a Balkan invasion, took the bait completely. The letters were opened, photographed, and the film was rushed to Berlin. The key document, the letter detailing the invasion of Greece and Sardinia, was delivered to Adolf Hitler himself. A counter-deception was run by British intelligence. They sent frantic, heavily coded messages to the British consulate in Spain, knowing the Germans would intercept them, urging the consul to retrieve the briefcase. This manufactured panic confirmed for the Germans that the documents were genuine and of immense national importance. Hitler, convinced, overruled his own commanders, including Field Marshal Kesselring, who maintained that Sicily was the true objective. On May 14, 1943, Hitler issued a directive ordering the immediate reinforcement of Sardinia and the deployment of the 1st Panzer Division from France all the way to the Peloponnese in Greece. He famously interrupted a phone call with his military attaché in Rome, shouting, "You can forget Sicily, we know it is Greece." The deception had worked on the only man that mattered.
The true invasion, Operation Husky, commenced on July 9, 1943. Over 160,000 Allied troops stormed the beaches of Sicily. While the fighting was still fierce, the German defense was catastrophic. Key divisions, tanks, and air support were waiting hundreds of miles away in Greece and Sardinia, hunting a ghost invasion that would never come. Operation Mincemeat's impact was immediate and measurable. The element of surprise was complete. The Allies faced minimal initial resistance, securing a decisive foothold in Europe and achieving their objectives in just over a month. The rapid success led directly to the downfall of Benito Mussolini, shaking the Axis alliance to its core and saving countless Allied lives. The man who never was, Major William Martin, was buried with full military honors in Huelva. It was not until 1997 that the British government, in a quiet act of historical reconciliation, acknowledged his true identity, Glyndwr Michael, a Welsh laborer. His epitaph was updated to include his real name and the phrase, "He served the truth that set us free." The shocking success of Mincemeat proved that in modern warfare, the imagination of a handful of intelligence officers could be a more powerful weapon than 1,000 tanks. Part 3. The Venona Project. The victory in Sicily was a triumph of Allied unity against a common foe. But even as the American and British soldiers advanced across Europe, a deeper, far more insidious war was being waged not against the Nazis, but within the Allies itself. This was a war of infiltration, of silent betrayal, fought in the language of code and cipher. This was the Venona Project. Venona was a secret counterintelligence program initiated by the U.S. Army's Signals Intelligence Service, SIS, in 1943. Its initial task was almost academic: to collect and translate Soviet diplomatic and intelligence cables that had been intercepted from 1940 onward. The Soviets used an encryption method known as the one-time pad, which, in theory, produces unbreakable code. But a code is only as strong as its practitioners. Through a catastrophic and astonishing error caused by wartime expediency, some Soviet code clerks began to reuse parts of the cryptographic key, the one-time pad. This mistake created a tiny, exploitable mathematical flaw in thousands of encrypted messages. Over the next 2 decades, the dedicated code breakers of Venona, a small, highly secretive team, many of them women, would painstakingly exploit this error, slowly piecing together fragments of Soviet communications. It was a tedious, agonizing effort, often translating a single word at a time, but what they ultimately unlocked was staggering. Venona revealed that the Soviet Union's intelligence services, the NKVD and the GRU had run a massive, successful espionage campaign against their American and British partners while the war was still raging. This was not merely the collection of military secrets, it was a profound, systemic infiltration of the Allied state apparatus. The deciphered cables exposed agents embedded in virtually every sensitive wartime department: the State Department, the Treasury, the OSS, America's own nascent intelligence agency, the British Foreign Office, and, most critically, the highly secret Manhattan Project. These Soviet agents were not foreign operatives flown in by parachute. They were American and British citizens, often driven by an ideological commitment to communism or personal greed. They had secured positions of immense trust and influence. The cables referred to them not by their given names, but by cover names: Homer, Pilot, Rest, and Alwa. The intelligence community in both Washington and London faced an agonizing, impossible dilemma. The Venona intercepts were the smoking gun of Soviet espionage, but they were also a code-breaking operation that had to remain secret at all costs. To reveal the intercepts was to immediately tip off Moscow that their code was compromised, forcing them to stop reusing the one-time pads and severing the connection to their entire spy network. For years, the intelligence agencies sat on a ticking bomb of information. They could use Venona to secretly identify suspects, but they could not use it as evidence in court. This restriction profoundly shaped the early Cold War, leading to an environment of intense suspicion and the controversial, often brutal search for traitors. Venona was the unseen blueprint for the communist infiltration that fueled the anti-communist purges of the late 1940s and 50s. While some of the publicly targeted individuals were victims of paranoia, the intercepts showed that a significant operational spy network did exist. The cables provided the foundational knowledge used to build legal cases against high-profile figures. One of the most consequential exposures was that of Klaus Fuchs, a German-born physicist working on the Manhattan Project. Venona's fragments identified him as a Soviet spy, a revelation that would unlock the final, most shocking act of wartime espionage: the theft of the ultimate secret weapon. The Venona project continued its silent work long after the war's end, with the last cables not fully translated until the late 1970s. It was only publicly declassified in 1995, decades after the Cold War's end, finally proving that the atmosphere of fear and betrayal that defined the era was not merely Cold War hysteria. It was based on the shocking, real-time intelligence of a massive, systematic betrayal by a supposed ally. No secret in World War II was more closely guarded, more profoundly consequential than the Manhattan Project. It was a massive, multi-site enterprise to harness the power of the atom, driven by the fear that Nazi Germany might achieve the same goal first. A generation of the world's greatest scientific minds worked in total isolation in remote locations like Los Alamos, New Mexico, attempting to turn theoretical physics into a weapon of existential power. The project's security was legendary, overseen by General Leslie Groves, who operated under the absolute belief that no one, not the scientists, not the military, not the cleaning staff, could be trusted. But while Groves focused on the movements of men, the Soviets were focused on the movement of data. Soviet espionage had an immense strategic advantage. They didn't need to steal the physical bomb. They needed the blueprints and the calculations. The entire project was an enormous, complex scientific problem, and stealing the answer would cut years and billions of dollars off their own development. The race was on, and the Soviets had already infiltrated the highest echelons of the scientific team. The most shocking aspect was the breadth of the network. It was not a single, lucky operative. It was a structured, redundant operation involving multiple, highly placed sources. The first and most damaging source, identified by the Venona intercepts, was Klaus Fuchs. Fuchs was a brilliant, naturalized British physicist. Driven by a deep-seated communist ideology, He worked at the heart of the Los Alamos lab, privy to the most crucial theoretical and engineering secrets. He was an integral member of the theoretical division, led by Hans Bethe, and his work was fundamental to the design of both the uranium gun-type bomb used at Hiroshima and the infinitely more complex plutonium implosion-type bomb used at Nagasaki. Fuchs didn't just pass along rumors, he passed along comprehensive, detailed scientific data. His packages delivered to Soviet contacts contained exact calculations, experimental results, and blueprints for the bomb's detonation mechanism. His information was so complete that years later it allowed the Soviets to cross-check their own findings, confirming their path and accelerating their timeline. But Fuchs was not alone. The Soviets employed a second, younger spy, Theodore Hall. A prodigy who joined the project straight out of Harvard, became the youngest scientist at Los Alamos. Also motivated by ideology, the fear that the US would maintain a nuclear monopoly, Hall began passing secrets to his handler. Hall's information provided crucial redundancy, corroborating Fuchs's data and convincing Moscow that the intelligence was real and actionable. This network of brilliant scientists was linked by a series of handlers and couriers. The critical nexus point was Harry Gold, a Philadelphia chemist who served as the primary courier, collecting the technical data from Fuchs and delivering it to Soviet handler Anatoly Yakovlev. Gold's testimony and the later confirmation by Venona demonstrated the shocking efficiency of the operation. He had been a reliable conduit, delivering information that would fundamentally shift the global balance of power. The operation was conducted with near-perfect tradecraft. The scientists met their handlers at pre-arranged, dead drops, or brief, nondescript meetings. They communicated through coded messages about supposed business trips, passing packets of priceless data that looked like harmless technical papers. The sheer scale of the betrayal meant that when the Soviets finally tested their first atomic device in August 1949, Joe 1, the world was stunned. The US intelligence community had grossly underestimated how long it would take, predicting it would be 1953 or later. The reality was that Soviet espionage had cut a crucial 3 to 5 years off their timetable. The exposure of these spies, Fuchs's confession in 1950, Gold's testimony, and the later silent confirmation of Hall through Venona, who was never prosecuted due to the secrecy surrounding the Venona source, unleashed a wave of global paranoia and recrimination. The theft of the atomic secret was the most shocking espionage operation of World War II because its impact was not felt until the peace. This act of betrayal did not save a single life on the battlefield. Instead, it ushered in the existential dread of the nuclear age, launching an arms race that defined the next 50 years and brought the world repeatedly to the brink of annihilation. The true, shocking lesson of the Manhattan Project spies was that the war against fascism and the war for the future were being fought by the very same people, sometimes on the very same day, in the same secret laboratory. The history books detail the movements of armies, the strategies of generals, and the sacrifice of soldiers. But the true, shocking victories and devastating losses of World War II were often secured by a handful of players operating entirely in the shadows. Operation Mincemeat demonstrated the awesome power of deception, where a simple, well-told lie, built upon the fiction of a dead man, could save 5,000 lives and secure a critical foothold against the Axis. The Venona Project revealed the chilling truth that a supposed ally was in fact an active enemy, running a sophisticated, deeply embedded spy network that compromised the most sensitive secrets of the Western powers. And this silent infiltration of the Manhattan Project secured a devastating long-term victory for the Soviet Union, fundamentally changing the architecture of global conflict and ensuring that the war's end would immediately transition into the perilous dawn of the Cold War. These operations remind us that espionage is not a noble pursuit, but a shadowy realm of moral ambiguity where the ends truly justify the means. In the war fought with secrets, deception was the ultimate weapon, and the price of failure was the shape of the world to come. The bombs fell, the flags were raised, but the whispers of the spies never stopped.